Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here continuing on with our Supercoach Insider team and SC discussions. And we've got a special guest from the Footy Mailbag. It's Clarky. How are you, mate?
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. Doing all right.
Oh,
Doing all
beautiful,
right.
mate. I know you're fitting me in, squeezing me in with family commitments at the moment, so I do appreciate you taking time out to talk the Melbourne Demons, who are very close to your heart. So I thought, what a great opportunity to sit here and talk about what we see for the D's in 2025.
Yeah, look, it was a bit of a weird 2024. I think we didn't quite meet the mark on a lot of different aspects. So 2025 is hopefully greener pastures for us. But yeah, I mean, look, I've said this on the mailbag before. It's currently a new dad, so I'm still in that mode of I've only just really come back to the football fray, which has kind of been a bit relieving in terms of being able to come back with a fresh mindset, much like the players in the off-season break. Just to come back and look at things with the fresh eyes and no cynicism quite yet. But we'll see if that comes out in the discussion.
Is she a D member yet, mate? Have you got her on the little baby?
Oh, of course. Of course, I was emailing them right right before she was due to come, making sure I was all squared up for this year.
I love it. All right, so we are here to talk the D. So luckily they do not have the game in round 0, which means they get the full complement for us for Supercoach. Bye is in round 15. So the way the buys are spread out this year, it is the second last buy. So that's still good if you want to bring a premium in for the run home, but you easily can start them. The draw is not too bad because obviously the D's didn't have the greatest year last season. So the Giants at home, it's a bit of a 50-50, but the G, you always back them in. North, the Suns at home, it's a good place to have them. Geelong's going to be obviously the tough one at GMHBA, and then the Bombers on neutral territory over in Adelaide. So that's not a too bad a start. And then even after that, it's Freo at home, the Tigers, which probably should do a number on that Anzac Eve match, and then play West Coast away. So if you kind of look at it as a whole, as of an 8-week thing, I think you'd be pretty happy with that, Clarky.
Oh, look, I'd love for a couple of softballs, so I at least get a few runs on the board that I can go to and watch them win a couple of games. I feel as though it's a bit of a broken record when we talk about Melbourne and how they've been performing. So looking at that early fixture, it's like, okay, yep, there are some tough matches in there in GWS, Geelong, and even Essendon to a stronger degree. But then some nice, Gold Coast should be a pretty hopefully easy one. North Melbourne as well, and we don't know what to expect from this Melbourne outfit, right? I think we can all kind of agree that where we have a list that is full of talent and we seem to have the same problems year after year. And some years that means that we finish 7th or 8th. Some years that meant that we won a premiership, and then other years it meant that we finished, what was it, 16th, 14th or so,
Yep.
between somewhere in that round. I erased it from my memory pretty quickly after I saw the ladder. So I think it'll be nice to have a bit of a mixed bag for the start of the season.
Yeah, and it's one of the hard teams to get a kind of a read on what might happen this year because we do know their best is good enough, but with a few injury concerns, it could easily go downhill like it sort of did in 2024. Some of the double games aren't too bad, like playing North Melbourne and West Coast twice, so you'd be fairly happy with that. It would have been better if, I guess, Richmond, but you take those two. The Suns, well, you could definitely split them. The Saints, even, like, probably don't still always have that trouble at Marvel, but get them on the G, and then the two tough ones in Hawthorn and Collingwood. But in saying that, it's not like they were the top echelon of teams last year. They should continue to improve, but it's not compared to some of the other teams. There for their double games, it's pretty friendly. What are, looking at kind of that, are your expectations for Melbourne? Where do you kind of see them fitting in this season?
I think personally, I would love to see us back between probably the 6 to 12 range. I think is achievable given the talent and echelon of the other teams. That's based on performance. I think I'd like to see us make finals. That should be hopefully a given. We have enough personnel, and we just need to find a game plan that really accommodates to that. Like really struggled to put runs on the board, and that is Melbourne to a T, right? We've got one of the best defenses in the league at some points of both, from 2021 to now, with Stephen May and Jake Lever as a 1-2, and then you've got, the likes of Trent Rivers, Salem, and Tom McDonald having a renaissance himself in defense last year. We've got no shortage of mids, and they just have no way to put scores on the board, which is Melbourne's biggest downfall, which I think means that at the lowest, we probably sit similar to where we are now. I think at the lowest, if I was purely cynical, 14th, I'd probably say would be we fall down there, and we only fell as far as we did last year because it was such a tight game in the middle of the ladder. But I would hopefully see us between 6 to 8. We should put everything together, and to be quite honest, I've probably ranted too much about how much Simon Goodwin grinds my gears with his inability to be dynamic when it's needed. I'd hope to see a little bit more of that this year, which means that we could take some teams by surprise with the talent that we have, rather than them just going, oh, well, they're just going to try and kick it into the forward line again to Harrison Petty for some bloody reason.
With the talking about Simon Goodwin, so he's been signed up to the end of 2026. Is there a world where he doesn't survive this year?
I think there is a world where that has to be the case, but I think that would be the nuclear option, and that would be us, say, in the first 10 winning 2.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like significant underperformance. I think Simon Goodwin is a perfectly fine coach in the sense of he's not egregiously awful. He doesn't do things that you're like, that's completely off the walls, insane. Why are you doing this? But he also doesn't do anything that's special, and he doesn't really play to his strengths. He firmly believes in the system that he's created, and that can be an issue, right? Like, we see that with so many other teams where they have a thing where they stick to their guns, and next thing you know, they're out the door, right? And it happens to teams that, like I would say Horse, over at Sydney, he was a great coach, right? And then, but when they put the runs on the board, it feels like he was kind of pushed out by the end of it, even though he was making grand finals, which, even if you don't win them, is still a bloody hard thing to do, right? And Simon Goodwin has won one grand final, and that seems to have brought him years of goodwill. So, look, who else is out there? That's the question. Is it better the devil you know? Probably at this stage, until we have a real idea of who could be next.
Yeah, for sure. I always think that it's like, what are the replacements? The fact that Horse now has become available. If Port were to make a move, is that the direction Melbourne should go anyway as a senior coach, or is it somebody to bring through maybe the next flock of talent? But then again, you have traded out of this year's draft, because you're kind of a bit more all in with this list. So is that saying, we expect, our expectations are high, and we think we should be around the mark of making finals and then competing there with this squad? Or, and if it was a new coach, what sort of direction do they take it? So it's kind of hard to get a read on. And then you kind of look at this 23 that I've put up. So as you said, the back line is the nuclear there. It's been very strong for a long time. McDonald, May, McVee, Rivers can play through the midfield, but he's very good at half back. Jake Lever and Salem, as much as May and Lever, they're starting to age a little bit, it's still a very solid back line. The midfield, young Windsor, fantastic out there in his debut season. Petrarca, depending on how that cracked rib is. So there are obviously a lot of question marks there. Ed Langdon's been brilliant ever since coming over from Fremantle. Cozzy Pickett's going to have big questions this year because we know Freo are coming hard for him. Petty was in the same boat when the Crows were coming hard. Thulstrop was good in his debut season. Bailey Fritsch, Van Rooyen, and Chandler. And then Maxi Gawn, as long as he's fit and firing, is obviously in the ruck. They did bring Tom Campbell in as the backup, just in case stuff goes wrong there. Clayton Oliver can be the best player in the comp, or can be the most frustrating, depending on where his head's at, where his body's at. So huge question marks about him. Jack Viney, and then I've gone Bowie, and I've gone the two young guys in Langford and Lindsay. All reports are these kids are fitting in beautifully. They're ready to go. Both might not play early on, but I'm actually pretty confident on Lindsay. Everything I've seen, so I'll be interested to see if you agree with that. Sparrow, and then I've put the Harry Sharp in because he's come across from Brisbane, played the 6 games, and he's got a lot of pace. But you look at the guys that are missing out there. Jack Billings came in from St Kilda last year, played 16 games. Blake Howes, Taj Woden, Dan Turner, Jake Melshker, Marty Hoare. So there's a lot of guys that played a lot of footy last season that I have left out. So depending on injuries and sort of the everything else that goes on with a squad, I think any of them could be playing. You'd hope maybe not playing a lot of footy because that probably means things are going well. But yeah, I think they'll all get opportunities. What are kind of your thoughts there, mate, on the 23?
Yeah, it's really funny, isn't it, that we look at Melbourne and you've made a best 23, but we actually do know that there are guys who are getting significant bouts of time. I think the Jack Billings experiment has to be over. I don't think he was able to perform to the level that we needed him, and he didn't really seem to flow all that well with the playing group. So I'd probably be writing him off. I think as far as the best 22, I actually have no issues with that personally. I think there's probably a few guys who end up a bit stiff. I think Andy Moniz Wakefield has been a really young talent who's been with Melbourne for a bit of time now and had time to develop and could be really good if given the opportunity, but he needs to have that opportunity. And where do you fit him in? Where do you fit all these guys in? The biggest question marks I think we have are guys like between Langford, Sparrow, Lindsay, and I'd probably throw in Caleb Windsor in that little group as well, where it's these really extreme high-end young talents. I think Simon Goodwin will probably want to err towards the side of experience and let these guys grow a bit more naturally. So the training reports that I've been seeing have been absolutely glowing for both Langford and Lindsay. And to the point where both of them are so confident that I think it could probably end up being either a 50-50 between one of them, or will somehow end up with both. Sparrow may be falling out of favor. I like Tom Sparrow. I think he had a moment where it felt like he was probably going to be pushed as one of the next big things for the Melbourne midfield group as a young player, and he can be really talented at times. However, I think he's just not really, he's not hit that next level, and that's what you needed to see. Where it's, what's the difference between a good footballer and a great footballer? It's what you see Christian Petrarca doing every week. It's what you see Clayton Oliver doing. It's what you see even guys like Trent Rivers doing when they blast through the midfield. So those are the biggest questions I think we have, because we have no shortage of mids. The name that I think you mentioned that I think could be a little bit of a wild card is Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell has been looking really good at training. I've seen a lot of really good comments about his physicality, his ability at the moment. Max Gawn, we know, is the greatest ruckman in all of the AFL, and I will stand by that. Currently, as is, and even the last couple of years, just you can't go past Max Gawn as the classic archetype of the best ruckman. And I think Tom Campbell might be kind of a guy who could do what we expected Brodie Grundy and Max Gawn to do, but he's probably willing a little bit more to play second banana and is tall enough to have a bit of forward craft, right? So that gives a chance for Van Rooyen to maybe have a bit of a rest. Harry Petty, do they continue with that experiment? He's still training with the forwards, which makes me really upset. But, I think he's someone who could probably come in and provide height, a target, and if he can kick straight, then that's good enough for me. And that's where I think we're probably going to see most of the changes in that group, right? So Christian Petrarca currently injured is probably the biggest asterisk. So he cracked his rib again. Will we know if it's maybe a month recovery and if that's going to mean that we'll ease into the season with him? Well, I think that's really great for guys like Langford then and Lindsay, or even Windsor, because it gives them an opportunity to have a bit more of that mid time. We saw at the end of 2024, without Christian Petrarca, that midfield group became kind of a bit of a, everyone plays a part. It wasn't one person who stepped into Petrarca's role. So I think it is a bit of a plus for a lot of different guys on that team. So time will tell, but I think from the 23 that we've got there, it's hard to fault that. There's plenty of players I'd love to see there, but you only have 23 spots, don't you? So
Yeah, that's right. And as I was saying, you kind of want some of these guys missing out because things are going well. And you're right about Sparrow. Like his best is, yeah, it's kind of exciting for the group, but at the same time, sometimes it's just like, here's another kind of plotter. Jack Billings shows signs. So like, yeah, like a few of these guys very easy to be interchanged. And Casey's been a strong breeding ground for Melbourne for a long time. So there's always guys fighting for spots down there and playing at least a good level of footy. So they can come up and fill roles, but you're kind of hoping they fill roles because they're pushing each other for form, not just because Christian's missing because of a rib or Clayton's got something else going on, and then how does that reshape the team? Like again, like Rivers looks good off half back, but then does he move back into the midfield and then Bowie goes to half back and then you're trying to find somebody else to come off the bench as the backman because you've got this gap. And then is Rivers the long-term solution in midfield, or are they thinking him more at a half back? And now that they've got Langford and Lindsay in, is it giving them the opportunity? Where does Cozzy Pickett fit in all this? Are they all in trying to keep him, which they obviously will be? And what does he want? Like, does he want to be playing midfield? Is he just happy playing in the forward line? So how far do they change things to keep him happy to make sure he stays at the club? Where we don't know mentally if he's already got one foot out the door. I don't think it's as full on as like a Chad Warner situation where he's already buying $1 million mansions over in Perth. But it's definitely got to be a thought because we all live in reality where these players, because of their livelihood, they do look around and they do get better offers or they get offers from home. So there's a lot of questions there, and it's always a hard balance of how much you put other players out to try to keep others happy.
yeah, I think losing Cozzy Pickett would be a really big one, but I firmly am of the belief that if a player wants to go home for a reason like that, I don't think there's any reason a club should stop them. I was sad to see Neil Bullen go to the Crows, but it made sense to me for him personally, and also professionally, right? Like he has a lot to offer that group, and I think that's probably one thing that we haven't mentioned quite yet, where that is a bit of an opportunity for those younger guys to step in, as he was a bit of like a half forward kind of push up on the wing user. So there's a role there that does need to be filled. I did want to ask, and I probably should have at the time. Do I want to know where you think Melbourne are going to finish this year? Or
Mate, I tell you what, I must admit, through the trade period, I was hoping my mob Richmond were trying to get hold of Melbourne's pick because I do see a world where they can finish bottom four. And that's more because I'm worried about the fitness of playing 23 games of your key players in Gawn, Oliver, Petrarca, May, Lever. And if I don't think they're playing the majority of the season, then I think Melbourne are going to struggle. If they play the majority of the season, then Melbourne are definitely fighting for top 8. And once you make the 8, anything can happen. If we've seen in previous years, if they pretty well kick straight in games, they probably could have won another premiership in recent times. And so that's my worry because I don't think the backup's there for those sort of players, especially the defensive pillars in May and Lever. And they pretty well do carry the side. And they do. Unfortunately, it's just the way it goes. Like Gorney, 21 games last year, was fantastic effort, but what's he now? 34. It's going to be really hard for him to continue to back up in those sort of roles. Lever, he played the 18. So I just kind of get a little bit worried that it can happen, and we see players still like Jeremy McGovern's a great example, who even as he was aging still played a career season last year. So some of these guys can still play their best footy and still be on the park every week, but if something was to go wrong and these things happen, I sort of think, where does that leave Melbourne going forward? So that's the question. We've already seen preseason, and Petrarca and Gawn have copped injuries. The Petrarca one way worse than what Gawn is, but it only has to take another situation like that, and then I'm like, oh, could Melbourne be in that sort of bottom 4, bottom 6 conversation?
yeah, it's the harsh reality, isn't it?
Yeah, that's footy. You've touched on like a couple of my super coach targets there. We'll go into these guys in a bit more depth. We'll start actually with the ruck line first because you've mentioned Tom Campbell. I only played the 2 games last year, but I think, as you said, he's a great backup. Sort of that Melbourne forward line. He could definitely play round one, and then he's definitely somebody for our teams at 147 we need to consider because of that R3 spot. It does give that a little bit of more flexibility, and he doesn't have to play for us, but I really like the idea if you are, because a lot of people aren't looking at Max Gorn this season. Some people are like, he's still the best ruck, as you said. Maybe him versus Tristan Cherry, just because Cherry's did have a great year last year and Max is getting that little bit older. But, at the time of recording, Gorn's still the number one man and can dominate a lot of those teams that he's got early on in the season. So I think there's nothing wrong with kind of handcuffing Tom Campbell in your ruck line, because if Gawn was to miss only a 1 weeker or a 2 weeker, Tom Campbell just can come onto your team. And now we've also got the flex position anyway. You've got that cover there. So I like the idea of, it's potentially starting both rucks.
So the reason why Tom Campbell, and even to a much lesser extent Fullerton, who is still in fact on our list,
yes,
which I forgot about. I think Ben Brown retired last year.
He did.
Ben Brown is a massive key forward who also is, as a tall person, was immediately sort of related to that ruck position. When he wasn't playing, Van Rooyen was the next one. If there is a world where the Melbourne coaching staff go, no, we want Van Rooyen to focus on being a forward. He is a great key forward. I am really, really a big fan of Jacob Van Rooyen, and I love having him at the club because he gives me hope, which is the most important thing that you need. And also, I hear kills you. Haven't got me yet. So I think there is a world where Tom Campbell can fill in sort of it's that Ben Brown sort of big, tall forward, can do a bit of ruck work when Gawn needs a rest on the bench, and B, can also just act as a second tall target while Van Rooyen exists. So that gives Van Rooyen a better chance to run and jump at the ball, or if Van Rooyen is getting the first defender, then Tom Campbell gets a bit of a chance there. This is all a world that assumes he would get more than 4 games, maybe, or 2 games that he played last year. So it's a see a need, fill a need, right? So it's not unreasonable to suggest that this could happen. In terms of Max Gawn, I think missing starting him because of his age can be a bit perilous because, and we spoke about this last year, the way Max Gawn scores his Supercoach points isn't related to the ruck entirely. A big reason why Max Gawn scores well is not just because he's a great tap ruckman. So, tick the box if the midfield group is firing, Christian Petrarca's on point, Clayton Oliver's back to his best, say, you've got Jack Viney, you've got Caleb Windsor now in there, you've got Lindsay's Langford's having little chop throughs. That's great for getting tap outs to advantage. But on top of that, Max Gawn plays both ways. He is a marking target. He acts as an interceptor. He is a target to move the ball for the Melbourne game plan. And that's why he scores as well as he does. So even if he plays, say, 20 of 23 games, and you get anywhere between, say, 100 to he could score up to like 200, even that range, is there a reason to avoid him? Because his role isn't related just on his fitness as a ruckman. So I think it's worth having that conversation, right? Where even though he's top price for a reason, and he doesn't rely solely on the physicality of the ruck position. So he could to potentially be a little bit safer in that sense.
Yeah, and for sure. And even like you go back to 2023, we had some injury concerns when he got into the side, back in the side. Yeah, there was a period there we went 215, 120, 174, and 130, which is just insane. And then last year, he had scores of 162, 177, 162, 180, and 177. Like there's no one matching that. But as good as like Nick Dacos is as a midfielder, he doesn't have that consistent ceiling that Max Gawn puts up, which is absolute stupid numbers. And there's no like sort of period where it's like, okay, this guy's just gonna pick where you go. maybe we need to have a look at a softer draw because their matchups are wrong, or and he's going to have this little period where he's going to score poorly, or this is the period where they're going to sort of manage him or whatever. He just keeps trucking on all season, and it doesn't matter who he comes up against. He can dominate any sort of ruck. Like the 180 was up against like Marshall, who's no easy beat. Nan Curvis is a big brute and went 162 against him. And then if he does get a ruck who's undermanned, like he played up against Jordan Sweet, well, then he can also take him to the cleaners. So yeah, it doesn't matter the matchup, the age thing. It's more my worry about how many games he can get through. But in saying that, I feel more confident with these guys starting them than trying to burn the trade and then bringing them in. So if Max Gorn's fit, and I saw him last year where I went down to Casey and watched the preseason game between them and Richmond, and Max Gorn took himself off at half time, and where we were he was out there doing laps and extras. So if I hear any information where Gorney gets back and he's putting those extras in again, even at his age, you sit there and go, well, he's still going to be one of, if not the most dominant ruck in the competition, up against, it's Cherry round 2, but Briggs round 1, he should dominate him. Geelong could put up any sort of ruckman. Sam Draper in round 5, like, good luck to him. And we've already talked about the fact that they do have West Coast in round 8, who could be sort of Flynn. Meek's not going to worry him in round 9. So leading into the bye, it's pretty... it starts to get slightly harder, but up before that, it's a pretty good run of rucks. And then if something changes by then, if he was to go down or whatever, you can easily still trade him out and get on one of the other rucks if that's the way you want to go. Or, as we've said, if Tom Campbell looks like getting selected, pick him at your R3 and then just have the back, or pick a ruck in your flex position for those weeks that Gawn may miss.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about this idea when it comes to Supercoach strategy, that it's always easier to go down than it is to go up. And I think that's especially true in the ruck line. It's not an area where there is as much value as there is, say, in the midfield, where this year alone I could name, at least off the top of my head, 3 players between 400,000 and 500,000 that could be top 10 midfielders if everything went right. With the rucks, it's actually not as nearly as close as that. There's a lot of variation, there's a lot of room for fluctuation, and because it's such a tight line, if you start an underpriced ruck and they don't fire, you are going to struggle to find the money to go up to the premium that gives you safety. So you may as well start at safety, like you said. Go with, he's going to be the most healthy at the start of the season, broken larynx aside. Yep. But he's going to be the safest for you at the start of the season, and then he has the potential to break down. The longer you leave it, trading into a Max Gawn, like you said, at his age, is more risky because his body can only do so much.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing about it, it's, as you said, it's a fractured larynx. So it's not like he's had a soft tissue injury where we're worried about that reoccurrence. It's just a freak accident.
Yeah.
So it has pushed his preseason back, but at the same time, would he eased into his preseason anyway, just because he is that little bit older? He knows when to get his body right to go as it is. So it's not the worst thing that he's probably, having this little time to probably rest up. I mean, he's probably working on other parts anyway. It's just, the contact side of things, which he's been doing all his career as it is. So a seasoned campaigner, I don't think that's going to affect him too much. So if it comes out by the start of Feb that Gorney's back in contact training and it's all good, then I don't think we have a lot to worry about. If there's setbacks to that and the larynx taking longer to heal, then it's maybe a different story. And as you talked about the other sort of those, well, not mid prices, but they're all the rucker kind of top end, but the one guys in the 500 range, there's question marks about Orvin. We know Sean Darcy, as much as he's looking as fit as he ever has, there's an injury history there. There's we've TDK, the potential that Pitternet plays, and I know Blue supporters very happy with the idea that his name continues to get linked, but on any given week they could play them. Grundy showed what he can do in patches. Maybe a second year he could be better up there. Tim English can be has the potential to be the number one ruck in the competition, but did have a down year, and the Bevo factor always, plays in on that. So there's question marks around all these other top rucks. Or at least with Gorn, we know if he's playing, he can go massive. And the other thing is with these games, like not only is a great backup, he can be a captain, but a lot of people don't like captaining those guys with risk. But when we talk especially vice captain, who can absolutely dominate your weekend, the D's, especially early on, or maybe not those 2 Sunday games, but as they get through that early period, it's Geelong on a Friday night. You got Freo on a Saturday. So the first game on the Saturday, the Tigers is the first game to kick off Anzac weekend. Even West Coast is on the Saturday, so you can go Saturday into Sunday if you've got the right loophole. So they do have some early games. So if you're looking for a really unique, potentially unique vice captain option, because I think most people can be on Cherry, Gorney can definitely be on that. Definitely be your person.
That's it. No notes from me.
Yeah, no, I love it. All right, we'll move into all these midfield targets. So we'll go the 2 main guys first, Track and Oliver, both underpriced because of their injuries last year. So Track, we know only played the 13 games. Clarky, we know all the off-field issues that he was struggling with, which is probably his worst year in footy, because he pretty well came in and just started finding the ball from day dot. What are your thoughts on both boys going into 2025?
Yeah, I can't see a world where either of these guys have another year as quite as awful as they had in 2024, both professionally and personally. Christian Petrarca obviously almost dying from a football related injury, and then having to cope with that. I can't imagine the toll that would have taken on him and his family. And I think it speaks a lot to his character that he came back fully ready to go. I don't like to listen to a lot of the off-field noise anyway. For some reason, I seem to take it personally when it's about my football club or something like that. I don't know, something. But I don't know. I don't think I buy into a lot of the stuff that was sort of going on when people talk about how he was involving himself in the culture or choosing to participate, not participate. At the end of the day, he knows where his money comes from, and he seems like the type of person to go and give 110%, and you can see that from the way that he's loaded himself. A setback in the preseason with another cracked rib, I think that will limit him. The estimates were anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, but no time frame. I believe he's still not in full contact training again. But you can't see a Melbourne without Christian Petrarca. If he is fit, if he is well, he is dynamic. He is 550k and probably has, maybe a 20-point upside, I would say, Supercoach wise, if everything goes well and he's able to put together a season and Melbourne is able to put together the team that they want to run. So I think I can't see a world where he is not someone you should consider for even your starting side.
Yeah, he was averaging 122 after 5 rounds, well, including the round 0, but after technically round 4 last year. So the 5 games that the D's had played, so it came out on a house like on fire. It did slow down a little bit from there, but was still averaging 108 after 11 rounds. And then as you said, we know what happened after that. He is potentially underpriced. I'm leaning a little bit more to saying not starting him. Just if he didn't have the rib issue, then I did, when the Supercoach did open, I did have him in my side. But and that rib issue does push him back there compared to some of the other midfielders kind of in that range. But in saying that, it's one that I can easily potentially pivot to, especially with that sort of when they get that softer fixture after the first few rounds. So I'm even considering potentially starting a player, say, from a Hawthorn or an Essendon who have a round 4 bye. So I get those sort of 3 or 4 games to have a look at somebody like Petrarca and then make the swap there. Or if I'm not seeing it there, I can wait until that sort of bye period and he might be one for the run home. So there's the 3 times of the year that you can potentially look at Petrarca to get into your side if all things are going well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Clayton Oliver, what more can be said about this guy? I think we can all relate as humans, right? When things aren't going well in our personal lives, and then it turns around, you turn around and it's Monday, or you're going, or whatever day, and you're going back to work. I don't think anyone really ever turns up back at work and gives 100%. And I don't think that's possible. I think it's unreasonable to expect someone who is going through whatever personal things they have. I won't speculate on that, but it's wild to expect them to come back and do their best. But you did mention, Swizz, that we did see Clayton Oliver wasn't afraid to come back and try to rack it up. He was still racking up possession. He probably just wasn't. It felt something felt different about it, right? And maybe it was effort, maybe it was mindset, but 2025 seems to have been a new leaf. Clayton Oliver was one of the first players back to training after the new year, and one of the first players back to full preseason training anyway. He's looking to right the wrongs of last year, I think. And I think he knows that if he can give him his best self, then he's right back to the top of the board where he needs to be. So 450,000 for Clayton Oliver when there's no injury concern. We know that Melbourne weren't really doing all that well last year anyway, and kind of in a rut, like as a whole team. It wasn't even just him, right? Like if he wasn't having personal troubles, we probably would have just put it down to Melbourne being absolutely garbage for good portions of last year. I locked him into my starting side probably at the end of last year when I had an inkling of what he was going to cost. I think that kind of risk for a guy who accumulates the ball but has to use it well, it's the Tom Green effect, isn't it?
Yep.
We know that he's going to get the numbers. However, the real number that you want to look for is his disposal efficiency. Because if he's going to go consistently week after week after week, racking up 30 possessions at 55%, that's not useful to you. But you're better off taking that risk when he's 450K now if he goes up and then pivoting across to, as we said, it gives you a chance to look at some of these other guys who have that early buy and you can jump on them after their buy. Hawthorn have the round 4 buy? So, you could easily pivot from a Clayton Oliver to a Will Day.
Yeah, and I think this is where not even just those two, but I've been saying Clarky, even if it's after Brisbane's bye, which I think is round 3 with Will Ashcroft, or round 4 with Darcy Parish, who are both in that sort of range. Like, as you said, trying to jump up to get to Gawn from one of like a 550 ruck, it's a big jump trying to find 130K. Ashcroft, who's similar, even if he had a slight price rise, and Parish, who's 30K more than Clarky's starting price. You can usually find that, or some people kind of even start that in their kitty, kind of as a rainy day fund. So it's not that much to sort of have left over in case break glass, in case things go wrong there. So there are a couple of options around that Clarky price where you can pivot to this season if he doesn't start well. The big thing for me, there was probably a possession drop, and as you said, efficiency. But the free kicks away and the 50-meter penalties, we probably hadn't seen that from Oliver before. And that I think is more, you as you said, how many people roll up, of time record. We were recording this on a Sunday night. I've got to go to work tomorrow morning. If I haven't slept well, if I've had a bad day, if something's going on in my life, that you try not to let it affect you. Now, it's different for AFL footballers because the absolute world, Australia is watching them, and there's nowhere to hide. But I go to work and that, there's days where you half-ass it because you just everything else is going on in your world. And unfortunately for Clarky, that's what was happening for him last year. Probably things going wrong on the field. So he probably, lashed out, took out in some situations. And then you see these games where he had 5 free kicks against and a 50-meter penalty against. And all of a sudden that's a, minus 30 or minus 35 on his score where, normally he's way more disciplined than that. So I think that's the sort of side of things too that'll clean up for him. And even if he then finds the ball just a little bit more, because he was still laying the tackles. If he comes back as that 30 possession guy who's not giving away 5 free kicks in a match, he's a guy who can even average, low hundreds. He doesn't even have to return to that 110, 115, 120 guy because of it at his price. Even if it's 105, it's still value.
And let's be honest, Clayton Oliver's got a little bit of that rat about him. That's kind of nice. It's kind of fun to watch. I think I have absolutely no specific moments that back this up, but I did feel like he was a bit happier towards the end of the season with the playing group and getting involved with other guys a bit, like on field performances aside. So I think it's trending up for the young man.
Yeah, I agree too. All right, in regards to the rookie Ds, so I've got, as we've said, Langford, Xavier Lindsay, and I've added Harry Sharp in that because he has come across from Brisbane, does offer a speed option. I don't think he's best 22 at least to start off with, but he's obviously joined Melbourne for a reason, so he's got to be kind of in that mix depending on the preseason. So yeah, I think Sharp at 189's one not to really start unless for whatever reason there was an injury and he ends up on that wing for Melbourne. If Windsor or Langdon, or even they say Windsor's going to play more midfield with Petrarca out and Sharp's going to go sort of that wing, then it's a player to look at 189. But definitely the two that we're very interested with Langford and Lindsay.
Yeah, I think I could see Sharp starting in the year if all things went right for him. Like I don't think it's outrageous for you to put him in this list because he does have great speed, and you know what? I'll say it, Swizz. I like the vibe of Langdon. I think he's a little lazy sometimes. He is known for covering great distances. However, I don't think he quite has the impact that he used to have um, from when he first came across. When he first came across, he was awesome, amazing, and that's just kind of slowly dropping each year. Just the level of how much when you think like, oh, I haven't seen Langdon for a while. Oh, there he is. He's kind of not doing much. So I could see a world where maybe Langdon sort of is probably not. Probably not. I can see a world. Maybe Simon Goodwin's not coach in that world, but Harry Sharp, I think, could find himself on the wing at some point just because of that speed and movement. And with Neil Bullen leaving as well, I think Caleb Windsor could find himself in kind of like a hybrid half forward wing role. Out of the 22, 23 that we've got there, I think Chandler would probably be the most Chandler and Tholstrup would be the most likely to make way for either of those kind of changes. And then we have the problem of Langford and Lindsay, where I said it earlier, I think you could literally split hairs between these guys in terms of their absolute quality. Lindsay has looked great in training. Langford has looked great in training. Both of these guys should be on our radars. And if handed a debut, it's their spot to lose. We saw it with Caleb Windsor. If they play good football, they will hold their spot. That's, if nothing else, Simon Goodwin is being consistent with that with the young players. Sorry, no, I say that I remembered Kynan Brown. Simon Goodwin has been sometimes consistent with his young players, where Caleb Windsor got a really good run at it, and he was great all year. He was really fantastic. So I think Lindsay and Langford both have a spot to play at this point, based on the training report that I read from, I think, the 15th of January. Lindsay looked a little bit better than Langford, but if I go back another week, it probably says Langford is the standout of this training session. I think we're going to have to wait for the last minute to see that call, but it's going to be tough because we have the round 0 to round 1 issue.
Yes. I'm not disappointed we got Josh Smiley, but Langford was the Richmond supporter growing up. So he did play that one game, I think, with us in the VFL. Oh, that's sort of 12 touches, but he's been in the under 18s comp for 3 seasons, averaged nearly 26 disposals a game, takes clearances, kicks the ball inside 50, and one sort of 191 centimeters. That was him at the draft. At the time of the draft, not knowing if he's maybe have added a centimeter or two, but he was a real bolter, which does remind me a lot of Cripps, Bont in their years, like even Clary. They all came from kind of the clouds and moved themselves up the draft order. So Langford's following in that sort of same profile. And wouldn't be surprised if, like, I'm not expecting him to come out and average 100 on that, but as you said, by all reports, like this kid's ready to go. And even if Petrarca is fit and ready, I still think Langford, just announces himself for that team. We see these top 10 players all the time now. They're just so far ahead and ready to make an impact in AFL footy that they can just step up and roll into a round one lineup, even with seasoned players. And because of his size too, I don't think it's going to sort of worry him so much of playing up against the bigger bodies as maybe somebody who's of more of a slight size. 191's a big boy. So I think that'll help him with the rigors of AFL, where Xavier Lindsay is that more the smaller type for the midfielders these days, 183 to think that's the smaller type. But yeah, for when we're looking at some sizes of these midfielders, that might put him slightly back. But yeah, by all reports, again, it's fantastic. Could have potentially gone higher. Did have a bit of an injury affected under 18s year for Gippsland Power. But yeah, he's once he made it back in, he was just an absolute mainstayer. 24 touches a game. He's, I think the thing that's going to, which is great, is because they are so different to each other. Lindsay probably reminds you a little bit more of that. I think Scott Pendlebury's type has more time when he gets the ball. So where you probably got Langford, who's he's got, apart from the fact that he's got a lot of ability to kick the ball and stuff like that. He'll win the clearances. Big body, either kick it forward or dish the handball off, and then you've sort of got Lindsay when he finds it, he's just gonna have that poise to hit up the target that he needs to.
I read the training reports. I believe it was sort of December. It was just before the Christmas break, and I remember seeing one of these things. And I don't know where you sort of land on it. I think the number one thing that I always like seeing in training reports for rookies is the words confident or even the word overconfident, which I saw that written about Harvey Langford, where they said he's probably come in a little bit overconfident because he was definitely trying to take the game on a little bit more than he should and was losing possession because of it. But I actually prefer that, because I think rookies that make an impact, both visually, you think like, oh, okay, cool, like he's taking it on, he's not shying away. That's the kind of rookies that we want to see, because those are the ones that are going to make us points, right? Because they're not going to shrink away from a contest, they're going to take it head on. And that's the thing that really excites me about Langford, is hearing that and I'm just going like, yeah, nah, that's what we need. Like, we don't need someone who's just going to hide in the background. We need a guy who's just going to come in and just go, yeah, nah, I want to play. I'm going to try and take that spot. Like, take him on. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake. You never hold it against the young player for taking on the game and having personality doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And also the good thing with Lindsay could be that added to those midfielders who start their career off halfback. Like, that wouldn't surprise me at all if they kind of want to do the reshuffle, if they want Rivers to play that little bit more midfield time, or even be that seventh defender coming off the bench. So I think, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him get some of that opportunity there. And then, as time goes on, eventually spend more time in the midfield, where, Langford, I think what you'll probably see is that first bounce, maybe 5 minutes in the game, you're at the MCG, you'll have the MCC standing up as he stands up off the bench and then makes his way into that centre bounce.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else from the Melbourne team that interests you, from more of a Supercoach perspective, that you could see having an impact for us this season?
So I don't have any for Classic. I think Moniz Wakefield, actually, probably there is a chance that he could find his way back into the team at some point, just because I think he's actually quite talented and he showed a lot of really, really high level skill when he did get a run at the end of last year. But I think mostly from the Melbourne group, when I think of Supercoach relevance, I do think draft, right? And I know that this isn't specifically draft related.
No, but I
However,
think so. We do just try to discuss some draft players on here for our draft fans.
so I've got one I've got one suggestion which could go either way. But don't sleep on Tom McDonald. I'm not saying he's like anywhere. He's like a D5-6 kind of player, right? I don't know whether it's the carnivore diet that he's on, like the all meat, the 7 steaks that he has for dinner or whatever. But he has come back, and as a defender, I've really, really enjoyed watching him play. And I haven't enjoyed watching him play since that season he kicked like 50 goals, which was 2018, I think. So I've been a T-Mac fan, even though he turns like a boat. He just really found his straps in defense last year. Was playing some really strong defending footy, intercepting, was actually kicking straight as well, 2 targets. So I think from a draft perspective, I'd probably say maybe keep an eye on him. If he falls that far and you like, I don't know who to pick, give him a look. He's
Yeah,
definitely
no,
best 22.
yeah, he definitely is. I like that from back in that lineup. I also, um, I think, I always like Stephen May. Every year, I try to target him in draft. They're a little bit further down the line. I know him and Sachi with, I think their girl Millie. As you know, is now a parent, mate. It's as time goes on, they start sleeping better. But the early days, it does affect you. So I think that'll obviously help Stephen going into the year as well. So he is, he still managed to average 90 last season. But he goes through periods of where he can just have absolute massive games. And if you've got him from a draft point of view, there's nothing worse than like you coming up against a Stephen May and go, this guy can put up 120, 130 this week. And as you sort of D3, it's nothing worse than that. So from an opponent's point of view, so I really do like him. And I don't think you can ignore the sort of the wingers, especially Windsor. I think people will sleep on him because everybody targets the new boys coming in. So people will probably more likely in deep drafts go try to get Langford or get Lindsay because that's just the way all content creators will be talking about them if they're around that starting lineup and showing the signs, where somebody like maybe a Windsor just drops down on the thoughts process of other people.
Yeah, it's really easy to forget that Windsor averaged 89 last year. So that's really good for a first year player. Like it's not James Jordan levels. Remember the year that he had his debut, but he was just super solid, right? And there was a point where he was playing every week, and the only few weeks they didn't pick him were to rest him because they were like, he's a young player. We can't have him play every game because that's just not sustainable or good for his physical health. So, it's not a bad shout to actually just keep an eye out on Windsor as somebody who you could probably sneak onto your bench and just, in the right circumstances, probably pull on for a 90-plus performance.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah. Do you mean 89 without the sub? Because I think it was actually 50, 60 overall for the year.
Oh, sorry. It's 59. Sorry.
59. Sorry, I was going to say, it was just like,
I'll say it out loud. I've got
yeah.
a bad eye condition that means I can't read good.
No, but that's fine. But at least like he does get a lot of time on ground, which is the main thing. It's because he showed he had great endurance, which is the first thing you want from your players. It's always hard with wingmen because they can get stuck on the the wrong side. But another year under his belt, what he got. There were games last year where he did score a 120 and a very impressive 118 against Geelong, which is not the easiest team to play against. So. As he enters his 20th game this year, and as the season goes on, you're going to see more consistent scoring. I think those sort of 20s and 30s that he did put up, maybe sort of in those sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 games into his career, they start becoming sort of 50, 60 points. But you'll see some of those other a few more top echelon scores. So it wouldn't surprise me completely if he went from a 60 to at least an 80-point guy. And if
I hear some people are calling him an 89-point average guy.
Yes, which, mate, it could very much happen.
You know what? Sorry, I know we should move on from my era, but I was a bit surprised. Where I was like, that can't. It says it.
That's why I looked up. No. Like you could have actually said like any other probably lower number, and I would have been like, sure, no problems. But I actually knew that one. I was like, hang on, no, there's something.
No, it's
there's
something.
So good.
I always forget, right? Because like to pull the kayfabe off, I have a thing that like my eye is slightly the wrong shape. So it's not that my vision is bad, but it means that finer detail sometimes gets lost in like the letters. So the 5, because there's only like the small gap on the Supercoach screen between like the right hand gap and the left hand gap, it just closes in for me because I've got that stick. I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound right, but sure, I'll trust the website. No, I shouldn't have trusted my brain, listeners.
Yes. No, I love it. I love it. All right. I think that's all for the Melbourne Footy Club this year. Oh, well, for regards for our podcast. As always, check us out on all our social media platforms. Like, subscribe, Supercoach Insider 100 and Switch 26 for X, YouTube, and Spotify as well. Also, you find us. Clarky, where does the good listeners out there find you, mate?
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much for having me. We have you guys on our podcast over the Footy Mailbag often, and we love having you. We're big fans of you guys, and you've always been very supportive, and it's so great to be here. I appreciate you asking me. You can find me at Quantum JC on Twitter and Blue Sky. I also have the Footy Mailbag, which is my Supercoach podcast I do with my beautiful co-host Damo, who you probably will hear from at some point, I imagine. If anyone has any Freo questions, Damo's the guy to ask. You can also find me over at The Falcon, which is my footy adjacent podcast, which I do with Jesse, Chris, and Cass. And we talk the rounds that are the rounds that will be. We're currently on break at the moment, but we'll be back in February with some, preseason episodes where we talk about footy in a little bit more lighthearted, comedic way.
I like that, mate. So if you haven't already, join Clarky and his co-host, especially Damo, who's already been on for the Freo episode. It was a fantastic episode too. So now we do appreciate you coming on, guys. Coming on yourself and Damo, and we do appreciate all the listeners for tuning in. Thank you, mate.
See you next time.
See you guys. Bye.